What if fate had crossed the paths of two legends of the supernatural? Imagine Ed and Lorraine Warren stepping into the chaos of Georgetown, Washington, D.C., not as spectators, but as the central force, battling the ancient evil known as Pazuzu. This is not just a collision of mythologies, but a chilling reimagining of one of the most terrifying possessions in cinematic history, only now, with the Warrens at the helm. This story dares to reframe The Exorcist through the eyes of two of the most revered demonologists the world has ever known. The early morning fog had settled over Monroe, Connecticut, casting a silvery sheen across the trees outside the Warren residence. The air was still, unnaturally quiet, as if nature itself held its breath. Lorraine Warren, seated at the breakfast table with a half-empty cup of tea, stared out the window. Her expression was distant. Ed, pacing slowly with a manila folder under his arm, stopped to glance at her. "You're quiet this morning," he said, not needing to ask why. He had seen that look before. Lorraine didn't respond right away. Her hand trembled slightly as she set the teacup down. "It's not here," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's far, but loud. So loud I can hear it like it's in the room." Ed sat down across from her, concern deepening the lines in his face. "Another calling," she nodded, then looked up, her eyes clouded with something between dread and certainty. "This isn't just a spirit, Ed. This is ancient, unclean, mocking everything sacred." Ed exhaled slowly. It had been weeks since their last major case, a rare moment of peace, but he knew better than to assume it would last. "Do you know where? Washington, D.C., Georgetown," she said. "A girl. She's possessed." Possession cases weren't rare for the Warrens, but Lorraine's reaction was, she had seen demons tear apart families and faith, but this shook her without waiting for confirmation. Ed opened his Rolodex and began dialing a contact at the diocese in D.C. before he even finished the second number. The phone rang. He picked it up, exchanging a glance with Lorraine. "Mr. Warren, this is Father Karras from Georgetown University. I was given your number by someone at the Archdiocese. There's a situation I think only you and your wife might understand." Lorraine's hands clenched. "Go on," Ed said, signaling Lorraine to start packing. "There's a girl. Her name is Regan. She's been exhibiting signs of violent seizures, unnatural strength, speaking languages she's never been taught. We've tried everything. She even attacked a priest. The mother is desperate." Ed didn't need to hear more. "We're coming." As they drove south, the air grew heavier with each passing mile. Lorraine barely spoke, clutching her rosary, lips moving silently. Ed kept the radio off, allowing the silence to fill the car like a third passenger. By the time they reached Georgetown, the sun had dipped behind the horizon, casting long shadows over the aged stone buildings and cobblestone streets. Their first stop was the MacNeil residence, a stately home now consumed by dread. Approached the door. Lorraine paused. "She's watching us," she whispered. Ed rang the bell when Chris MacNeil answered. Her face was gaunt, eyes ringed with sleeplessness and fear. "You must be the Warrens," she said, voice hollow. "May we come in?" Ed asked. Inside, the house reeked of unease. The air was colder than it should have been. Furniture was slightly askew, like something had moved them with careless rage. Lorraine's eyes scanned every corner, sensing the stain of malevolence in the very woodwork. Chris led them upstairs. At the door to Regan's room, Lorraine stopped. The hallway lights flickered. "She's in there," Lorraine said softly. "But it's not just her anymore." Chris tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. From within, a low growl echoed, followed by a burst of guttural Latin. Lorraine gasped, stepping back. "It knows us." Ed nodded. "Let's prepare." Whatever they were facing, it wasn't just another restless spirit. Lorraine had felt evil before, but this presence was something different, something that stared back through time, something with a name older than scripture, something that would test everything they believed in. The morning light crept through the gray clouds, casting a pall over Georgetown as the Warrens returned to the MacNeil residence. They had stayed the night in a modest rectory nearby, offered by Father Karras, who had insisted they rest before attempting any further engagement with the entity inside. Regan. But neither Ed nor Lorraine had truly slept. As Ed parked the car on the narrow street, he glanced at Lorraine, who had not unclenched her rosary since they left the house. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" he asked. "I don't think anyone can be ready for this," she replied. "But she's waiting." Inside the house, Chris MacNeil greeted them with a mixture of hope and desperation. "She hasn't spoken since last night, not in English anyway. She just sits there, staring at the door." "Is she restrained?" Ed asked. Chris nodded. with the help of Father Karras and another priest. We didn't want to, but she tried to bite his hand off. The air inside felt even heavier than the night before. Lorraine closed her eyes, taking deep, controlled breaths. There's a thickness here, a spiritual weight pressing on every wall. Chris led them to the living room where Father Karras was waiting, his face pale and eyes deeply sunken. I've performed blessings, prayers, she mocks them. Speaks. In tongues there's no sign of the girl I first met. Ed opened his case. Inside were blessed crucifixes, holy water, candles, and their most precious artifact, Lorraine's personal reliquia medallion she claimed had once belonged to a stigmatic nun. Before we confront it, we need to understand it, Ed said. We need to document everything. Video, audio, written logs. Lorraine looked up, her voice strained. It doesn't want to hide. It wants to perform. It wants witnesses. When they entered Regan's room, it was as if they had crossed into another dimension. The temperature dropped immediately. The girl was strapped to the bed, her body eerily still. Her skin had a pallid, almost grey tone, and her eyes were rolled back, showing only white. Then she smiled. Another pair of holy fools, she rasped, the voice deep, masculine, and crackling like dry leaves. Come to dance in my shadow. Lorraine stepped forward. What is your name? Regan's head twitched, then turned completely to one side in a snap that should have broken her neck. You already know. You called. I answered. Ed pulled out his crucifix and held it firm. In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to identify yourself. A screech erupted from the girl's throat so loud that the window panes shook. Then she began laughing, first as a child, then as an old man, then a woman sobbing. The voices melded into one, chanting in Aramaic, then shifting to Latin. Lorraine's body convulsed suddenly. Ed rushed to her side. I saw it, she gasped, tears running down her face. A desert, a temple in ruins, windstorms, bones of animals and men, a statue grotesque, horned, littering. It was worshipped. Pazuzu, Ed whispered. The demon hissed through Regan's mouth. Say my name again, little priest. Say it and I'll show you your wife's death. In fire, in screams. Ed didn't flinch. He took Lorraine's hand and backed out of the room, back downstairs. Lorraine collapsed into a chair, still shaking. It's not just here to torment the girl. It wants to desecrate, to corrupt. It chose this child because she is innocent. It thrives on purity. Father Karras listened silently, absorbing every word. If it's Pazuzu, then we're dealing with something far older than the church. This isn't just possession, it's a calculated desecration. Ed nodded. We'll need the full rite. No shortcuts. And you'll need to be strong. Karras's hands trembled. I'm not sure I am. You don't need to be sure, Ed said. You just need to believe. And, as they prepared for what was to come, Lorraine whispered a final warning to herself more than anyone. This may be the one that breaks us. That night, the house felt like a tomb. The Warrens, along calm Father Karras and Father Marin, who had arrived from a mission in Iraq earlier that evening, gathered in the study to plan their first official confrontation. The priests carried solemnity like a second skin. Ed, ever the methodical investigator, reviewed the previous night's audio recordings. Lorraine, however, remained silent. She sat by the fireplace, staring into the flames as if seeking guidance from the void. Losing herself, Ed whispered to Marin when Lorraine excused herself for a moment. This one, it's getting to her in ways I've never seen. Father Marin, gaunt and weathered, looks back with a grave nod. Pazuzu is no ordinary demon. It is ancient chaos. It does not simply possess, it desecrates, corrupts, and consumes the soul until the vessel is nothing but rot and echoes. Upstairs, Chris MacNeil stood outside her daughter's room. Her hands trembled as she clutched a rosary someone had handed her days ago. She didn't even remember who. The wood felt foreign in her hands. She had never been a religious woman, but desperation pushes all reason into shadow. Lorraine approached her gently. Mrs. MacNeil, may I try something personal? Chris hesitated. What do you mean? I want to connect with her. Lorraine said. Not the demon, Regan. If she's still there, I might reach her. Inside the room, Regan sat tied to the bed, her eyes blackened like pits of tar. As Lorraine stepped in, the shadows seemed to recoil. She sat on a chair across from the girl, took a deep breath, and closed her eyes. She opened herself. Almost immediately, a scream echoed through her mind, not from Regan, but from Lorraine herself. She was falling through layers of screaming. Voices, memories, not hers. Visions of war, famine, death, and grotesque rituals performed beneath the noonday sun in some forgotten land. There were masks, incense, and a child sacrificed on a black stone altar. Then, a whisper. "Help me," Lorraine gasped, eyes wide. It had been a moment, but it felt like years. She looked at Regan, whose body trembled for a brief second. "Regan," Lorraine said softly. The girl's mouth opened, but it was the demon that answered. "So close, little witch. You almost touched her, but I am the door, and she is locked behind me." Lorraine stepped back, holding her head. Blood dripped from her nose. Ed rushed in. "What happened?" "I saw it. The rituals. The idol Pazuzu's temple. She's still inside, Ed. She's trapped but alive." Father Merrin listened in silence, then spoke. "Then we begin tonight." That evening the ritual was set. Candles were placed at cardinal points. Holy water was blessed. The room was anointed. Regan, now quiet but grinning, awaited them. As Merrin and Kara's began the rite, Lorraine stood back, her body shaking with the residual trauma of her mental contact. Ed documented everything, recording audio and taking notes feverishly. At first Regan simply screamed. Then, she began to float 6 inches above the bed, eyes rolling, limbs stiff like stone. The temperature dropped so violently that frost formed on the window pane. The priests pressed forward, louder now, invoking the authority of God. The room shook. A painting flew off the wall. A crucifix bent backwards. The candles snuffed out all at once. Then Regan spoke in Lorraine's voice. "He's going to die, Lorraine. Ed will die before the sun rises." Everyone froze. Lorraine stared. "What? You're lying, am I?" Regan whispered, now in Ed's voice. "He never told you about the mark, did he?" Ed stepped forward, furious. "This ends now." As he flung holy water, Regan shrieked, body convulsing violently. But the demon laughed through the pain. "I've danced with gods older than your Christ. You bring prayers to a war, Warren." Father Merrin's voice thundered through the chaos. "I command you, unclean spirit, leave this servant of God." Regan screamed along, soul-tearing wayland, then collapsed, unconscious. It was over. For now. Outside, as the group regrouped in the hallway, Lorraine whispered, "This isn't a battle. It's a war." And Regan was only the beginning. It began with a dream. Lorraine stood alone in a desert of bone-white sand, beneath a sky so red it bled into the earth. In the distance stood the idol horned, towering arms raised in eternal mockery of prayer. Its eyes burned with green fire. She couldn't move. She couldn't scream. And then it spoke, not with words, but with an overwhelming presence that crushed her chest and filled her lungs with smoke. When she awoke, she was screaming. Ed held her, his arms trembling. "You were convulsing, Lorraine. What did you see?" She was drenched in sweat. "It's not bound to the girl anymore. It's moving." That morning, before the sun had even risen, the household descended into chaos. Objects levitated and hurled themselves against walls. Doors slammed shut on their own. The crucifix in the hallway melted into a twisted knot. The demon was no longer isolated in Regan's room. It was loose. Chris MacNeil sobbed as she held a broken rosary in her hands. "What's happening? I thought it was ending." Father Karras shook his head, face pale. "The demon. It's playing us, buying time, or setting a trap." Ed and Father Merrin went upstairs together. Regan was still unconscious. Her pulse was erratic, her skin clammy, but something was different. She was smiling. Then came the voices. They echoed from the vents, from the basement, from within the walls. Dozens of voices, mocking, weeping, screaming prayers in reverse. The house was no longer just haunted, was being transformed, twisted. When Ed tried to bless the stairwell, he was flung backward by an unseen force, crashing against the wall and crumpling to the ground. Lorraine screamed, running to his side. He was breathing, but barely. Father Merrin ordered everyone to the parlor, where they reassembled with Regan, moved downstairs, sedated, but still smiling. Lorraine refused to leave Ed's side. "The demon attacked him directly," she said. "It's escalating. It knows we're getting closer." Merrin knelt beside Regan and began another prayer. But the demon erupted again, this time, using the voices of the dead father. "Is that you?" It whispered in the voice of Merrin's long-deceased mother. He faltered, then, through Regan's mouth. It spoke in Aramaic, an ancient chant Lorraine recognized from her vision. "It's not just Pazuzu," she said, standing. "It's a legion. Pazuzu leads it. But others have entered through the doorway he created in her soul." Father Karras looked at her, stunned. "You mean there's more than one?" "Exactly. The ritual didn't weaken it summoned more. Every failed prayer, every doubt, it feeds them." Merrin agreed. The ritual must be completed to close the gate. But as he stood, the walls began to bleed. Crimson lines flowed from the ceiling, forming runes along the wallpaper. The chandelier overhead trembled violently before crashing, down inches from Keris's head. Lorraine turned to Chris. Take Regan and go. Now you cannot be here when we confront it. Chris hesitated, fear and maternal instinct warring inside her, but one look at her daughter's lifeless body, now twitching violently, was enough. She nodded, grabbing a blanket and following Father Kara's toward the kitchen exit. Ed stirred Lorraine. He whispered, coughing. I'm here, she said, clutching his hand. We have to finish it. You can't face this alone. You won't, she said, standing. We both will. The house groaned as if alive. The floors trembled. Paintings warped into screaming faces. Then a new voice rang out low, gravelly, powerful, not through Regan but through the house itself. Come, holy fools, it said. Come, see your faith unravel. Lorraine walked to the center of the room, holding her relic high. We're not afraid of you, she said. A laugh shook the foundations you should be, and with that, every light in the house went out. Darkness fell not just of night, but of something ancient and bottomless, that the true battle had begun. Darkness engulfed the MacNeil house like a predator swallowing its prey. The shadows pulsed with life, moving unnaturally along the walls, curling around the corners like tendrils. Lorraine stood firm in the center of the room, her relic glowing faintly in her hand. Every instinct screamed for her to run, but she wouldn't leave Ed. He was resting on the couch now, bruised but awake. Despite his pain, his eyes burned with purpose. Father Merrin lit a single candle, its flickering flame casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. This is no longer a possession, he said grimly. This is a sacrificial altar. Ed nodded. It wants a witness to its power, and it wants a soul in return. Lorraine spoke, her voice hollow. I saw where it came from. I need to go deeper. Everyone turned to her. Ed sat up straight. No, I have to, she insisted. This isn't just about Regan. There's a gateway open, and Pazuzu's spirited dominion stretches far beyond her. I saw the origin, I saw the desert. She explained the vision, the cracked earth of an African plateau, a desecrated temple lost in time, where once humans had bowed not in worship but in fear. Symbols etched in ancient stone, blood soaked into sand, a presence that waited millennia to be called again. Father Merrin listened intently. I know the place, he said. I was there years ago. An archaeological dig outside Nineveh. We uncovered a statue, horned, winged, fanged. The locals refused to approach it. One of the workers, he disappeared. Days later, his body was found twisted in ways no man could bend. He paused. It began there. That's when I first felt it watching me. Ed stood slowly, bracing against the wall. We need to understand its path. If we know how it came through, we can trace the fracture and seal it. Lorraine nodded. Then we begin at the origin. Spiritually. They prepared the seance. Lorraine took her place within a circle of salt, surrounded by relics, sacred symbols, and blessed candles. Father Merrin anointed her forehead, while Ed gripped her hand, whispering a prayer into her ear. And then, the descent began. Lorraine's body went limp, but her mind plunged downward through endless layers of darkness, through winds howling. Across deadlands, she stood once more in the African desert. The sun above was black. All light came from below. Before her stood the temple. Its entrance was a gaping maw of darkness, carved in the shape of a screaming face. Inside, 1,000 whispers greeted her, echoes of forgotten rites. She walked forward, her feet not touching the ground. The walls were covered in ancient script, glowing faintly. Then she saw it. A boy, bound in chains, screaming, praying, and Pazuzu tiring, grotesque, devouring the boy's soul, not for sustenance, but for mockery. To humiliate the divine. You came far to see me, Lorraine, it said, turning its eyes to her. Will you trade yourself to free the child? She shook her head. You don't control me. No, Pazuzu said. But I know your fear. I tasted it the night your daughter almost died. When you begged for mercy, Lorraine gasped. You were there. I am always there, in suffering. She screamed and jolted awake. Her eyes flew open. She was back in the parlor, soaked in sweat, Ed cradling her in his arms. What did you see? A ritual, she whispered. They called it the binding of the gate. It was meant to summon a guardian, but instead they invited something else. It infected the land, and waited. Father Merrin stood, pale and trembling. And it's been waiting for us. For this moment, Ed nodded grimly. It's not just about saving Regan anymore. We have to stop it from spreading, from claiming more. Lorraine looked toward the staircase. Regan's body was still, but the shadows around her writhed. The gateway is open, she said, and unless we seal it, It won't stop with her. Night fell heavy upon Georgetown and inside the MacNeil residence. The final preparations began. The living room was transformed into sacred ground crosses on every wall, a circle of consecrated salt at its center, and a mirror covered with white cloth. The room was silent, except for the rhythmic, shallow breaths of Regan, who had been placed inside the salt ring. Lorraine stood over her, hands trembling as she adjusted the medallion around her neck. Father Marin and Father Karras recited prayers in hushed tones, their voices barely audible over the deep groan of the old house. Ed finished setting up the cameras, then approached Lorraine. "We don't have much time," he said. "You're sure you want to do this alone?" She nodded. "The mirror will reflect what the demon fears most. If I confront Pazuzu directly without interference, I may be able to weaken it." Father Marin approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You'll not be alone, Lorraine. God walks with you." She smiled faintly. "Let's hope he walks quickly." The cloth was removed from the mirror. Lorraine stepped inside the circle, facing her own reflection. At first all was calm. Then the room grew colder. Regan's body twitched. Her lips moved, whispering words no one could understand. Then the reflection changed. Lorraine stared into the glass and no longer saw herself. Instead, she saw a twisted version, pale eyes black, mouth wide open in an eternal scream. Behind this reflection stood a towering figure with wings like burnt leather and eyes like molten gold. Pazuzu, you've come far, witch. It spoke through the mirror, but you already know the ending. You saw it in your dream. He dies, you break, and I remain. Lorraine raised the cross. "In the name of the Lord, I command you to reveal your true form." The glass trembled, then shattered into hundreds of shards, but the demon's image remained in the void beyond the frame. It stepped forward, as if crossing dimensions. "You think faith is power," it hissed. "Faith is fear dressed as hope. I am older than your gods. I remember when angels first bled." Lorraine's voice cracked, but remained firm. "Then remember this, you're not welcome here." The room exploded in chaos. Wind burst from the broken mirror, candles extinguished, and furniture slammed into walls. Regan levitated, screaming in multiple voices. The demon's face twisted in fury. Father Marin and Karras rushed to the edge of the salt circle, reciting exorcisms louder than ever before. Lorraine fell to her knees, clutching her relic, speaking in tongues of protective invocation. Suddenly, Regan's body dropped to the floor. Everything stopped. The silence was deafening. Lorraine stood, breath ragged. "It's weakened." It was drawn into the mirror's gate, but it's not gone, not yet. Ed helped her out of the circle. "Then let's finish this, together." As they gathered their strength for the final confrontation, Lorraine turned to the camera Ed had placed. "If you're watching this, if you believe in the darkness, then know this. There is something ancient and cruel out there. But we are not helpless. Faith, love, and unity, there are weapons." She looked to Regan's sleeping body, and this child. "She's not giving up, neither are we." To our viewers who have stuck with us thus far, our sincerest thanks. Your courage in going through this journey with the Warrens is something that honors this story. But know this, the best and the darkest is yet to come. Stay with us, because in the next chapters, the truth behind Pazuzu will be revealed in a way that you will never forget. The dawn that broke over Georgetown was grim and reluctant. Mist hung over the city like a veil of mourning, as if the land itself sensed the war unfolding within the MacNeil home. Inside, the Warrens and the priests gathered in a cold, dimly lit kitchen, each nursing silence, as if words could disturb the fragile calm. Regan remained unconscious, her breathing steady, but her soul still tethered to something dark. Father Marin stirred his tea absently. "There's something I haven't told you," he said, voice low. "During my excavation in Iraq, we found a second statue, smaller, more detailed, hidden beneath the temple ruins." Ed leaned in. "What was different about it?" "It had chains carved into its wings," Moran replied, as if the figure had once been bound and broken free. Lorraine's hand trembled slightly as she poured hot water into a basin. "But chains, I saw them too, in my vision." Marin nodded. "I believe what we're facing isn't Pazuzu's full form. It's a fragment, an echo. But even an echo of that entity is powerful enough to destroy faith." Father Karras stood apart from the others, hands in his pockets, shoulders slumped. His face carried the weight of something he hadn't said. When Lorraine approached, he flinched. "You've seen something," she said softly. I don't know what I believe anymore," he confessed. "I've tried to hold on to my faith, but this isn't theology. This is cruelty." "You're being tested," Lorraine said. "That's how evil works. It weakens the wall before it storms the gate." Karras's eyes were moist. What if I am the gate? Before Lorraine could answer, the house shook. A deep guttural sound echoed from the basement. The temperature plummeted. All lights went out, and from the darkness, a voice called out Karaz's own voice. I renounce him. Everyone froze. Lorraine turned to Karaz. That's not you. But he was shaking violently, tears streaming. It's using me. My doubts. Father Marin stood. We need to act now. The demon is moving through him, probing for a crack. If he falls, we all fall. Regan screamed from the upstairs hallway. Her body had moved on its own when they found her. She was crawling backward across the ceiling, chanting in a blend of languages: Sumerian, Latin, Greek. Her eyes burned yellow, and her mouth frothed. She dropped suddenly, crashing to the floor. With a sound like thunder, blood pooled beneath her, forming a sigil one Ed recognized immediately from an old grimoire. The seal of abandonment. Lorraine gasped. It's trying to sever her completely, to make her soul unreachable. The group began the rite again, this time with all 4 participants: Marin, Karaz, Ed, and Lorraine. Regan howled as the prayers intensified. The window shattered, black smoke erupted from her body and swirled in midair, forming a shape vague monstrous, with clawed hands and a contorted face. The smoke surged toward Karaz. No, Lorraine screamed, throwing herself between him and the entity. Her relic flared white hot in her hands. The demon recoiled. Karaz collapsed, weeping. It's me, it wanted me. Ed took his hand. Then we give it no more ground. They completed the rite, chanting louder, stronger. The sigil on the floor hissed, then cracked like dried clay. Regan convulsed once more, then went limp. It was over for now. Downstairs, they sat in silence. Lorraine's voice was quiet, haunted. It's not just faith that's being tested. It's trust, unity. That's what evil wants, to fracture our connection to each other. Father Marin stared at the floor. The final act will not be in this house. It will be within us. And as they prepared for what came next, a new shadow passed across the house, one that didn't belong to any of them. Something had entered. The night that followed would come to be remembered by the Warrens as the longest of their lives. Regan was placed once more in the center of the circle, her body bound, not by ropes or straps, but by the sacred seals etched into the floor with consecrated chalk and salt. The house had grown unnaturally quiet, as if the very air were holding its breath. Father Marin stood by the window, hands clasped tightly around his rosary, eyes distant. Lorraine sat beside Ed, who looked pale, still recovering from the demon's earlier assault. Father Karaz, shaken but resolved, prepared the ritual texts. They had decided this would be the final attempt. Lorraine lit the candles and sequenced north, south, east, west, each flame flickering violently before stabilizing. She recited a protection prayer in Latin, and for a moment, peace lingered. Then Regan opened her eyes. They weren't hers. You've come to die. All of you, the voice rasped from her throat. It was deeper now, layered with multiple tones, as though a chorus of agony was speaking in unison. You carry your crosses like shields, but they are splinters in my realm. Ed stepped forward, voice steady. You speak through stolen mouths, coward, but you fear us. Regan convulsed, her face contorting into a grotesque mask. I fear nothing born of man. Father Marin began the rite, joined by Karaz there. Voices growing in strength and conviction. Lorraine held the mirror shard from the broken ritual. Earlier it still reflected Pazuzu's form, faint but present. She aimed it toward Regan, whose body began to tremble violently. The demon laughed. You think you've won? I am not in the child, I am around her, above her, below her, below her. The room darkened again. The light from the candles turned blue. The air thickened into a nearly tangible force, pressing down on everyone's chests. Furniture cracked, walls bled. A new dot. Suddenly, the salt circle shattered. A windstorm of black mist surged out from Regan's body, lifting her into the air. Her arms spread wide. Symbols appeared on her skin. Agent, alive, moving. Lorraine screamed over the storm. It's using her like a conduit. The mirror weakened its hold, but it's channeling from beyond. Father Marin's voice boomed. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I cast you out. Regan shrieked, eyes rolling, body convulsing. Her voice cried out in 1,000 tongues. The ceiling cracked. The walls bent inward. Then, silence. Regan fell. Lorraine rushed to her, checking for signs of life. She was breathing barely. Then Ed collapsed. Ed. Lorraine screamed, catching him. He was ice cold, his pulse fading. Karaz dropped the ritual book and rushed over. He's going into shock. No, Lorraine whispered. The demon, it's jumping. Marin staggered back, clutching his chest. It's reaching for another vessel. Karaz stood. Then take me. The room shook. Lorraine looked up, tears in her eyes. No, but Kara stepped forward, arms wide, staring at Regan's lifeless body. Take me, you coward. Come into me. A gust of air surged. Regan gasped, and her eyes cleared hers. Truly hers. The demon had left her. Now it stood. Within Kara's, his eyes turned black. He smiled. Then, with one final cry, he hurled himself out the window. The crash was heard down the street. Lorraine rushed outside, falling to her knees beside the broken body of the priest. He was smiling. The demon was gone. Inside the house, Regan wept quietly, unaware of what had just been sacrificed for her salvation. Lorraine returned, held her hand. You're safe now. But the cost would be a scar none of them would forget. The morning after the exorcism was bleak. Rain fell steadily over Georgetown, as if the heavens themselves wept for the soul that had been lost. The street where Father Karras met his end was cordoned off by police tape, but there was little they could make sense of. Officially, it was an accident. Unofficially, those who saw the look on his face at Reen, almost triumphant, knew something greater had transpired. Inside the MacNeil house, time moved strangely. Chris MacNeil sat at Regan's bedside, holding her hand. The girl slept peacefully now, her body no longer twitching, her breath soft and even. The bruises remained, but the rage, the possession was gone. Her innocence, however, had been permanently altered. She would never remember it all, not clearly, but the trauma etched itself into her bones like a shadow only she could feel. Downstairs, Lorraine tended to Ed. Though weak, he had regained consciousness. His spirit, however, seemed heavy. He gave everything, Ed murmured, referring to Kara's everything. Lorraine nodded, her hands wrapped around his. He knew what was coming. He chose it. They sat in silence for a long while. Father Merrin remained with them for another hour before leaving to file his report with the church. He looked years older than when he had arrived. His steps were slower, his words more deliberate. This will not be the last, he warned Ed and Lorraine, but it may be the worst. The Warrens knew he was right. Later that afternoon, Lorraine returned to Regan's room alone. The girl was awake, staring out the window, her expression calm but distant. Hello, Regan, Lorraine said softly. The girl turned slowly, her eyes searching Lorraine's face. Do I know you? Yes, in a way, Lorraine answered, offering a warm smile. You're safe now. The thing that hurt you, it's gone. Regan tilted her head. There was a man in a dream. He said I had to be brave, but you would find me. Tears welled in Lorraine's eyes. That was Father Karras. He saved you. Regan blinked. Is he gone? Lorraine nodded. Regan looked down. Did it hurt? No, Lorraine said. He wasn't afraid. Downstairs, Ed stood by the window, staring at the street where the tragedy had occurred. He thought about every soul they had encountered, every spirit that had clung to this world in pain or rage. But this had been something else entirely. This was a war with something that existed long before man understood evil, and still, they had survived. That night, Lorraine placed the mirror shard into a lead-lined box. It still shimmered faintly, a reminder of what they had faced and what might remain. Ed closed the case beside it. Do you think it's truly over? Lorraine didn't answer immediately. Then, with a deep breath, she said, not over, but held back. For now. They left the house just before sunset. Chris MacNeil hugged them both, tears in her eyes. I don't have words for what you did for us. You don't need words, Lorraine said. Just live. That's what it hates most. Life, love, peace. As they drove away, Lorraine looked in the rearview mirror. The house loomed behind them, still standing, still scarred. But its spirit, Regan, was free, and that was enough. For now. Time passed, but the echoes of what had happened in that house never truly faded. For the Warrens, the Georgetown case became a silent cornerstone in their archive, never spoken of in detail during lectures, rarely referenced in interviews, not because it was their most terrifying encounter, but because it was the most intimate, the most human. Months later, back in Monroe, Connecticut, Lorraine sat alone in the basement of their occult museum. Before her, sealed in a heavy glass case lined with sacred inscriptions, rested the fragment of the mirror that had reflected Pazuzu's face. Its glow had diminished, but Lorraine never truly believed it was dormant, only waiting. Ed joined her, a mug of coffee in hand. It's been quiet lately, Lorraine nodded. Too quiet. They had faced many spirits, vengeful ghosts, tormented souls, inhuman entities. But Pazuzu wasn't just a demon, it was a symbol, a memory of ancient worship, of the dark hunger in humanity's past. A being that thrived not merely on pain, but on despair, isolation, division. Ed set the coffee down and retrieved a letter that had arrived the day before. It was from Chris MacNeil. She says Regan's doing better, therapy's helping, school's difficult, but she's making friends. Lorraine smiled. That's all we ever wanted, for her to live. Ed nodded, eyes focused on the mirror. And what of us? Do you think it'll return? Lorraine didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to the case, placing her hand gently on the glass. I think evil like that doesn't disappear. It shifts, moves, looks for cracks. She turned to face him, but it underestimated one thing. What's that? Our bond, our faith. Not in heaven, not in ritual. In each other. Ed took her hand. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, and the sky darkened as clouds gathered. Somewhere far from their home, in another place forgotten by time, a shrine lay buried beneath sand and bone, and within it, something ancient, stirred of air, patient, ever watching. But for now, silence. The story of Regan, of the priests, of the battle that claimed more than it gave, was over. It would be studied, debated, mythologized, but the truth would remain locked in the hearts of those who survived it. Ed and Lorraine Warren, demonologists, warriors of light, not flawless, not invincible, but unwavering, and always, when the shadows rose again, ready to answer the call.